For as long as I can remember, I have always felt unsafe and afraid. Not only were there predators and sex offenders living in my home, but I was also afraid outside of my home. I walked pretty far to school and back home every day, and there were a couple of things that happened on my journey. One of them was a guy who approached me in the park and showed me a picture, a pornographic picture. He was pacing back and forth, and I remember feeling nervous of him and tried to avoid him, but he kind of beelined it for me and took this picture out and showed me. I felt uncomfortable and I kept walking. He got into his car and he followed me, and I was very afraid. I remember weaving through streets trying to duck and hide from him, and when I thought it was safe, I darted into my house and looked out the window and saw him driving past. Then, I can't remember if it was the same night or a few nights later, this man comes to our house and starts sawing at the window. We had this small window that was painted in, an old screen was painted in. And I woke up early in the morning to this sawing, and my siblings were still asleep. And I snuck off of my bunk bed over to my brother's bunk bed and peeked really, really carefully out the window when the sawing stopped for a minute. Because I thought he'd be possibly looking away, and he was, and I saw this man that was sawing at my window, and it scared me, and I jumped off the bunk bed and turned on the light. And when I turned on the light, I heard the ladder that this guy was on fall and him kind of stumble, and I ran into the kitchen to tell my parents. My dad was preparing to go to work early in the morning, what had happened. They didn't believe me. They dismissed me. They told me that I was probably dreaming. They didn't even go out and check. And the next morning, my brother and I went out because I needed him to believe me. And we went out and we saw, and sure enough, there were ladder tracks from being dragged and footprints. I did not feel safe. Another example was in 5th grade. We were having a certain kind of event where family members were coming to lunch with us. There was no one there for me, but I was at the table with this girl who had her older sister from the junior high come over, and she gave a pill to this girl who was my classmate in 5th grade, and I overheard them mentioning that it was speed, and I had a bad feeling about it, and they were telling them to hush hush, and so I felt like I needed to go and tell my teacher in 5th grade, and I did. And the teacher, for whatever reason unbeknownst to me, called both of us up to the front of the classroom and said, she said that you did this, that you are doing drugs, that you got this pill. And after school that day, as I was trying to get back home, I was gang jumped by this girl's older sister and her friends. There were 4 or 5 of them, and they cornered me and they kicked me and they hit me. And when I managed to sneak underneath them and start running and get away, they threw a big block of ice at my head, and it hurt really bad. There were bullies that held knives up to my brother's head and threatened to scalp him. that I felt like I needed to get the attention away from him and lead them into the park after me. This kind of thing happens so often that I guess the biggest awakening for me was when I was a young adult. I had two little babies, toddlers, and we were up visiting mom and dad on their property, and my dad had gotten a new go-kart, he calls it, and he was really excited to take his new grandkids on this ride. But early that morning, my sister decided to take it upon herself to start the go-kart and take them on a ride. And my mom was really upset by that. And so she goes out and she ends up punching my sister in the face in front of my kids. My sister hits her back, and then she goes running off to the back of the property. And my mom goes back inside the house. I go check on my mom like I did as a good daughter. And then I go to check on my sister to make sure things were calmed down. And as I walked to the back of the property, there was a tree on fire, and I panicked. My sister had lit a tree on fire in her anger. And I started running back and yelling to my dad. On this property, they had no pumped in water, so it was kind of a scary situation. Lots of dry trees and brush around. And my dad comes running out with this like Culligan jug of water, or two of them, I don't remember, but somehow by miracle he was able to put out that fire. And after that, after I felt like everything was kind of calmed down, and I'm kind of playing my part, the part that I always played, I called up my husband and told him what happened and how it made me feel and how uncomfortable I felt. And my husband said, "Why are you still there?" And it was one of the first times that I was like able to question myself, or to have that kind of freedom to say, wait, why am I there? Can I leave? Do I have the ability or the option to leave? And I remember that being the key moment with my grandfather as well, when I was 15, and he was playing with my nipple, and he said, "Is this okay?" And I felt my spirit come back into my body and figure out what was going on. And I was like, I have a choice. Is this okay? No, this is not okay. And so in this instance with my mom, I ended up packing up the kids and saying, I just want to go home and be with David, and drove home. The next morning, my mom calls me up and asked me if I was proud of her for hitting my sister in the face, for standing up for herself. And I said, actually, Mom, I think that there was a better way to do that. And she started to bring out this trail of stories, like she always does, about how awful of a person I am. And she brought up things like, you have no respect for our property because one time you dropped a little drop of tuna fish water on the carpet, of which I panicked and scrubbed up really hard because I knew how she would react. Stuff like that, all the way to things that would just hurt my soul. Like, at 3 years old, you ruined your brother's self-confidence because he learned how to button his shirt, and he came to me and said, "Look, Mom, I can button your shirt," and then my shirt, and then you came and said, "Look, Mom, I can do it too." And from that day on, your brother's confidence has been ruined. And I think that was the first time that I swore in my life. I just broke down and I called my mom a bitch. and I threw the phone and it shattered into a million pieces, and I just broke down crying on the floor. And my husband came and asked me what had happened, and I told him, and that was the first time that I finally blocked my mom from my life. And it's kind of, I think she was blocked with no contact for like 7 months until she hunted me down at a state fair that she knew that I would be at. And then I wrote her some boundaries of parameters of what needed to happen in our relationship if it continued. But the thing is that I always made excuses for my mom because I knew that she was also raised by a bully. I knew that she had gone through the abuse that she had. I felt like my dad wasn't home a lot, and it's true that he took construction jobs. He was a heavy construction worker, and jobs like that end. You get laid off and get sent to other places. But there was always a part of me that felt like my dad didn't want to be at the home. And it's because my dad himself felt bullied, I believe. I think he always felt inferior because of his hair lip. But I also witnessed the way that my grandparents would just his parents would just kind of like put him in this spot where he couldn't leave, and he would be lectured. And this one time I just remember him being taken aside from my cousin's wedding, and he was trapped in the kitchen just hearing this lecture, and his countenance was just fallen, and my heart was just aching for my dad because I knew that he was doing the best that he can, but he was being lectured for his job choices and his marriage choices, and I think that is the reason why my dad couldn't protect me, was because these things, they imprint on us and they leave a residue where, when we're a child, we can't get out of these situations and we believe that we are powerless. And my dad believed that he was powerless and wasn't able to protect me as much as he could have. And the same with my husband, who was beat up and put down by his brother a lot, who has since apologized, and we have a good relationship with him. But my husband, could not protect me either because of his own beliefs of being unworthy and unsafe himself. I just want to end by saying that we cannot live life with our hearts closed off. We need to be more open-minded and loving people. We need to see each other. Maybe see the past, maybe see the possibilities. Maybe notice when a 5-year-old girl isn't acting the way that the other 5-year-old girls are acting.